Hello and welcome to another member request video, a series where YouTube and Patreon members can request a short or a TV episode for me to take a look at. Now for this one, someone suggested to me, hey, can you do a Goofy short? And so I've decided to pick my favorite, which is Homicide, released in 1945, and it's directed by Jack Hinney. You can find this fully restored and uncut on the Walt Disney Treasures Goofy set, and yes, I do realize those sets can really go for an arm and a leg, although the Goofy one is a little bit easier to find, and it has all the Goofy shorts except for the two Freeway shorts that were released in the 1960s, although you're not really missing out too much on that. And for this review, I've actually upscaled that print to close to a HD quality, and I get it, it's not going to quite match a proper HD scan, but for now, I think it does the job pretty nicely. In case you haven't seen this one, well, it's one of those Goofy clones shorts where we're just at an ice hockey game and we're just going to see a whole bunch of puns and gags revolving around ice hockey. I mean, there really isn't any story to speak of here. But it's a real shame that this one hasn't been put on Disney Plus, because this one is one of the funniest shorts ever, in my opinion. This one, honestly, is on par with what Warner Brothers were doing at this time. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that this would have been production during World War II, and Walt Disney had his attention on other things. He had his tour down south in South America. He was dealing with the US Army regarding making training videos. There was even the workers' strike a few years prior, so these really wild and wacky shorts that came out in the mid-1940s tells me that because of Walt Disney's attention elsewhere, the actual animated crews got away with a lot more wilder stuff. Of course, Disney would have had to watch and sign off for these, but it's possible that he did so with gritted teeth, but I'm not sure. But this is also the period of time where Tito Colby, because he had a falling out with Disney in the late 30s, he did some work in other studios like the Fleischer Studios. He even did a few voices of Warner Brothers, where basically he made fun of Disney. Even one short, he would even do the Goofy voice, I guess really just to stick it to him. But in 1944, he did return back to the studio and voice Goofy until he passed away in the late 1960s. Here though, because it would have been production before he fully returned, they just used sound bites of him doing the various grunts and noises, whatever he did prior to leaving the studio the first time. Because regardless of your thoughts of these Goofy shorts of this time period, they were pretty clever with getting around the fact that the main voice actor had left the studio and at that time was perhaps likely not to come back. We've got the benefit of hindsight that yes, he came back, but they didn't know that. So they had to figure out ways to get around it. They tried some sound-alikes. They couldn't quite get someone that sounded like Pinto. So they just did a lot of these. They did a lot of how-to shorts, and they did a lot of these with millions of Goofy clones. I think it's quite creative. Now, there is some trivia for this one, but I'm going to save that as we go through the short, because there's one in particular that's around at the beginning anyway, and it's something that you might have thought was something, but I'll go into a little bit more detail as to some of the names. Because, first of all, when we open up, I love the title card, by the way, how it's got the Homicide done through the ice skating marks on the ice there. It's a pretty nice touch. But you can see the credit Paul J. Smith doing the music. And funnily enough, when you watch this short, if you really pay attention, there's only one bit in the short that has music, and that's the music where we're at halftime and the cleaner is cleaning everything up, including the ref, I guess, except in a really weird scene, but that's the only time you hear music. The rest of the short, you just hear the crowd ambience and all the noise and sound effects and whatnot, so I guess this was a pretty easy job for Paul J. Smith in this case. But as we open up, we see it's a 60-degree cooler inside, which I never understood as a kid because we don't have Fahrenheit here, so now I know it's pretty cold. And as we open up, we see one of our Goofy clones. He's sitting himself there nicely with all those heated lamps, nice and comfortable. And I don't know about you, but the few times I've been to sport games, I'm always crossing my fingers going, please, I hope no one sits next to me. Please, I hope no one sits next to me, and inevitably they do, even when it's not even a sellout. Like in this case, where they really pack them in like sardines. But I always wondered as a kid, when those two main spectators that we're going to see all throughout this short push everyone away, I wonder where some of them actually went. Why didn't they come back and act all upset that they don't have their seats anymore? But anyway, I think it's pretty funny. In fact, that one's a great one of slow-mo, all the other people being pushed away. So now we get to a point where people of this channel know I love to freeze frame, newspapers and things like that. And sure, this is a newspaper, but there was a time where before matches of certain games, you would get like a scorecard or perhaps a magazine or something along those lines that you take with you so you can follow along with the game and add all the statistics as the game is played. I haven't been to a sports game in a long time. In fact, pre-COVID is when I last went, so I'm not sure if they even do that here in Australia, but in the US, let me know, or even in Canada, because this is hockey after all, let me know, do they still give out these scorecards or do they still give out these magazine type things before a game? But you'll notice before all the scribbles go on, a whole bunch of names. And this is one of those little in-jokes. You don't even need to know this, but hey, it's something that caught my eye. So all these names here are Disney staff members. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but there are a few that are definitely worth noting. I like the fact that the referee is Clean Game Kinney, which is a reference to the director, Jack Kinney. You got Icebox Patino, that's Al Patino, an animator, Fearless Ferguson, Norm Ferguson, animator, famous for that wonderful footage of Pluto showing off expression without speaking. Cupie Nichols, Charles Nichols, who was an animator and director. Slugger Hanna, Jack Hanna, another director at the studio. Tiger Adelquist, who's Hal Alderquist, animator and later TV producer. Swede Larson, Eric Larson, one of the 9 Old Men. Even Milt Kahl as Killer Kahl, 9 Old Men. I'm sure the boys would love that because Milt Kahl had a very strong personality. Whenever you hear someone talk about him, they always say that he was a very tough character who could pretty much tear you limb from limb if you don't do your job correctly. Hurricane Smith, I believe that's a play on Paul Smith, the composer, as I mentioned before. Butch King. Jack King was a director around this time. He would retire the following year, but he was around at this time doing some Donald Duck shorts. Tara Sibley, Brian Sibley, animator. He worked on this short as well. Bomber Nordberg. I'm putting a question mark on this one. Is that animator Bill Berg? I'm not sure. Bustin' Boyd. That would be a reference to Jack Boyd, the effects animator on this short. Speed Pete. That's a really weird one there, but I believe that's Bill Pete, who was a story writer for the studio. Spike Riley. I believe that's a reference to background artist Art Riley, who worked on this short. So the other ones I missed, there were various staffers at the studio. Some more well known than others, but those were definitely some of the ones that are more well known. If I've missed any, and if you want to point out any of the others that I've missed there, definitely put it in the comments below. So here the narrator, who's done by a gentleman by the name of Doodles Weaver, who did a few shorts around this time as the narrator. With a lot of the shorts of Disney, when they needed someone to narrate something, whether it's in a how-to short or something like this, they would seem to shuffle around between different actors, and in this case, it's Doodles Weaver. And again, any other voices you hear is either Pinto Colvin stock footage or just various other voices that they had around the time. And there's one particularly interesting one I'll get to very soon. So we hear the narrator saying all the changes. And of course, I've always enjoyed the scribbles there, where some of them don't even make sense. Some of them even switch teams in this case. Like I said, Starling there. I don't know if that's a reference to Carl Starling. Probably not. Or McCormick is written here. If any of those scribbles mean anything to you, definitely let me know. I would imagine there'll just be other staff members at the studio. And the cherry on top is that even the teams are different. Now, they've changed it from, instead of the Moose and Pelicans, it's the Loose Leafs and the Anteaters. Sure, why not? But we get to the game itself, and we get a few running gags. And so we've got the two spectators booing and hurraying, as you'll see rotated all throughout. And we see our two main players, Bettino and Ferguson. Apparently, seeing them two head-to-head is going to be something of a marvel to see, but we won't really see much of them, of course. I do wonder if there was like a friendly rivalry or some sort of an in-joke why they picked Bettino and Ferguson, because they were two animators at the studio. Was there something between them? In any case, we see our ref, who's probably the most goofy of the goofy clones in this short. Love the animation here of the ref always slipping over and being able to hold all those pucks in a very shallow looking pocket. But we see that the ref has the eyes at the back of his head as Bettino and Ferguson, in the first of our running gags, is put into the penalty box. And at this point, I just want to say my exposure to ice hockey pretty much begins and ends with this short. I have not really seen the sport properly. I may have seen a few scenes of ice hockey in certain sitcoms or whatever, but this is probably the main thing. So if I've missed any more in-jokes regarding the ice hockey element of it, definitely let me know in the comments. But we see our main stars are now in the penalty box, and it could be anyone's game. But look at the shot where the referee puts the puck down, again setting up the start of another running gag, but look at how quick it takes for them to knock the referee Goofy into the actual scoreboard. And yet those players don't seem to get penalised, but in any case, we just see that it's just a whole bunch of crazy manoeuvres onto the actual ice. It's weird though, if you look at the background there, they even go over the actual goals there, but it happened so fast, it's probably just a minor error that they didn't bother to fix, because I guess no one except me takes notice of these things many decades later. So the referee gets knocked out. We get a beautiful gag involving the puck replacing the spectator's sandwich, which the goalkeeper seems to enjoy. I wonder what's in that sandwich. It looks kind of weird, but in any case, they find the real puck and they smack the crap out of his hands. And that's another great one, the slow-mo. In fact, the animation in that scene is incredibly loose. If you just look at those bits frame by frame, you wouldn't think it's from Disney. You'd think it's from some lower budget studio. I mean, it works perfectly well in motion, but it is definitely interesting to see. Now we see the goalkeeper defending the goal and the puck seems to go missing. And also this is weird, they decide to strip this goalkeeper down to his long johns, which, yeah, that's a weird one. Now that sneeze, because I was alluding to the whole sound effects thing earlier on, it sounds the same as one of the sneezes for Sneezy from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So again, they would have kept a lot of these sound effects on file and just used them as necessary. But they find the puck, which is in the goalkeeper's head, and we see a payoff of one of our running gags with the two spectators, with one of them getting confused as to who he's actually cheering on. Again, love that as a kid when I watched this. But my goodness, some of the animation here is incredible, and this is where a lot of the budget would have come from, because if you look at shorts from studios with lower budgets, like even at Schlesinger's studio, you'll find a lot of the shorts is just basically one or two characters in a scene, maybe three, no more than perhaps four, and they will do some shortcuts and background characters. Here, they've got so many of these characters just beating the crap out of each other on the ice rink there, and again, that's another great one to slow-mo as we see our captains, Bertino and Ferguson, come out and they just beat the living crap out of each other again, and are sent back to the penalty box, continuing our little running gag. But wow, again, looking at the continuing battle after the Bertino and Ferguson are put back into the penalty box, you can sort of see why Walt Disney may not have been keen on this, because again, this is something that looks like it could have come out from the Warner studio around this time. But it gets more and more intense. We even break the ice literally with one of the players seemingly going through it, but nope, everyone literally freezes as the first half is over, and we can all catch our breaths. And again, as I mentioned before, we hear the only music of this short, which is the halftime music. Now, again, for those who actually do watch ice hockey, let me know, is that the kind of music that they would play at halftime during these ice hockey matches? I definitely would love to know. So the cleanup happens, even literally the ref, for whatever weird reason. And I like having a look at all the objects that are being swept up. You've even got boots with spurs on them. You've got a full cup of coffee there. There's even cat eyes in the background too. It's a really weird thing. They really go all out here. But we see, as the second half begins, that neither side has scored and each side has 3 penalty points. So what's going to happen next? Well, we're going to continue our running gag of the referee trying to set the puck down without getting belted like last time, goes in the penalty box and gets thrown out onto the ice ring. And again, great one to slow-mo there as he gets run over by the ice skates. I mean, ouch. That certainly wouldn't be pleasant. That's probably the most gruesome part of the short here. But we get the one moment where every time I show this to my kids, we just roar with laughter. Just this one player from the red team, I forget which team is which in this one, goes forward, and we get a beautiful butt gag with the red player being completely crushed, and he looks like an apple core. Again, a beautiful one to slow-mo. And I know I mentioned that a lot already, but this one definitely has a lot of great candidates for weird images while slow-moing. And we get a minor scene with a crowd of, I guess, really large goofies and a really small goofy, where you got the small goofy, who's obviously for a different team there, and everyone tells him to shut up. So I don't know about you, but I've been to a few sports games where there'll be some random person going for some random team that's not even there, and everyone just tells them to shut up. So that's why I always think I want to see that scene. But we're back to the game, and again, Bettina and Ferguson, they're let out, and they start fighting again. But from here, the intensity of this short is what gets me every single time. So it's always a fast-moving short, but from the last third, you have shots that go by so quickly, and the gags just come through thick and fast. It's just incredible. As we see our goalkeeper, who seems to have everything in hand, but no, one of the teams ends up scoring. And we can go back to our spectators with one obviously happy, one crying. But again, look at the slow motion and the frames of the happy spectator just hitting the head of the other one in happiness. It's so bizarre. And we get the last of the running joke involving the ref trying to set play, and this just gets me. Like, why would he dress up like a knight like this? This is so ridiculous. But look at the timing of it. He lets go of it, but the puck is not even to the ground. He's bolted away so fast, but no, the players end up crushing him into like a tin can kind of thing. But the ref still does his job as Bettino Ferguson once again come out and are sent back to the penalty box. Now, if you think this shot was crazy up until now, you ain't seen nothing yet, because we see the goalkeeper just hitting one of the players like he's at a golf game hitting a golf ball, ripping through the crowd, which makes no sense whatsoever. But we get that beautiful shot, which I know this wasn't made for 3D, but if this was converted into 3D, this shot would look pretty cool. So the puck goes towards us, hits the ref, and jackpot. The goalkeeper hits the ref, and we see pucks everywhere. We hear the narrator just pick up the speed with his narration. Each shot gets more and more intense. But you'll notice some shots cut in from different Disney projects. So first up, you see that airplane diving in. That's through a very obscure feature-length movie that Disney did called Victory Through Air Power, which was a film about how the Allied powers could actually win the war. And there was no mention of anything regarding nuclear weapons at the time. So that one's definitely an interesting time capsule. Why they picked it here? I don't know. They just do. So again, there's just intense moments, and I'm not going to describe each and every moment. I mean, you can see it on your screen here, but one of my favorites is the whole just packed to the absolute brim with hockey pucks. Just how was that even set up? That just blows my mind. And yes, even though I haven't really watched hockey before, just the ridiculousness that they would have room for 3-digit scores in a hockey game is absolutely ridiculous. And we get the goal scoring light blowing up as well. But we see the crowd, they just all decide to enter and everyone just starts fighting. Because what else are you going to do in a hockey game, right? And between all the fighting, we see clips from How to Play Football, another great goofy short, and even How to Play Baseball, which is another great goofy short. Now that bit that was randomly put in, which is hilarious, of what I believe is the Wright brothers flying a very early version of an airplane, that's also from Victory Through Air Power, where the first part of that movie is them going through the history of aviation up until that point. And for good measure, let's just include Monstro the Whale from Pinocchio, because why not, right? But some of the editing here between the different random footage is hilarious as well. So you've even got one point where one guy bites another spectator's leg, just cuts on a bit of footage. All in all, though, they're all fighting, and we see all our players all being cordial, just watching everyone else fight, because as we all know, hockey is a spectator sport. And you can even hear the tiredness and narration at the end. I wonder if the narrator just did all of that in one hit. Was it scripted the way it was and he did it, or was he told just to cover certain beats and say random things to make it sound like an intense narration, and then they got the footage around it? I don't know, but either way, it works really well and get a wonderful punchline at the end. Wow. Again, this is, a Warner Brothers short made at Disney. And this was definitely a childhood favorite. I had a goofy VHS tape, and this was one of them, so I constantly saw this one. So definitely nostalgia plays a part of it. Now, this may be my favorite Goofy short, but I would actually not pick this one as representative of the Goofy filmography. I'd pick probably something else. Maybe Goofy or Wilbur or something along those lines as representative of the character. Or one of the Donald, Mickey, and Goofy trio shorts. But that doesn't change the fact that this is so funny and it's a go-to short every time. And that's why I give it 10 out of 10. Yes, nostalgia is going to play part of it, but it's just so damn funny. So if you get a chance to watch this, definitely do yourself a favor and do so. But that will do it for this review. So if you're watching this when it's gone public and you want to request a review, just simply become a YouTube or Patreon member and I may pick your suggestion. You can pick any short that's not Looney Tunes, but you can even pick an animated TV episode too for me to cover, because I wouldn't mind taking a look at some of that as well. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.
Uh-oh, a penalty. There go the guilty players into the penalty box. With these stars out, the complexion of the entire game may be changed. A hush of expectancy settles over the crowd as the teams line up for the face-off. The referee drops the puck, and the game is on!